What is up, guys? This is Tcg Sam here, and in today's video I got for you guys kind of a tips and tricks video on like how to play on a budget. And I'm going to be using my budget Shaddolls deck that I recently profiled. If you haven't checked that out, be sure to check that out. Put a link in the description if I remember. But yeah, anyways, before we begin, I just want to ask you guys to please remember, if you haven't already, leave a like, comment, subscribe, because it really helps keep me motivated, keep posting more videos like this, and it really helps the channel grow. But yeah, with that being said, I just want to say, without any further ado, let's get straight into it. So normally I do a test hand video, but like it's control Shaddolls, there's not really much to test against without an opponent. So if you guys want to see a duel, stay tuned for that, because that's coming soon if it hasn't already come out. But I'm just going to be discussing some of the things you should know when you're playing this deck, especially playing this budget version. So starting off with the Shaddolls lineup, I'm going to cover the monsters and the spells and the traps. So obviously with the monsters, you can see our Shaddolls lineup is like I would say it's a medium size. It's definitely not minimal, but it's also definitely not like a big Shaddolls engine, because we're playing 3, 6, 9, 12, 13 Shaddolls cards. I think that's a very mid-sized engine. And the reason I bring that up is that just gives you a very rough idea of how many fusions you can make with this. But it's also important to remember that like you have Schism too, so like you gotta manage your graveyard at all times. And when you're playing a budget deck like this, it's also very important to like remember how many resources you have left in your deck. That's gonna be my tip number one. Remember how many Shaddolls resources you have in your deck, because you don't have access to huge just win buttons and auto wins like Access Go Talker or Boral Sword. So you're gonna be playing the long control game, and it's very important to manage your resources like that. Next up, I'm going to talk about Hedgehog usage. Hedgehog, as you all know, when it's flipped up, you add a spell or trap. When it's sent to grave, you add a monster. And when you're only playing 2, you're pretty much only ever going to be able to set one from your deck using Wendy, and the other one is pretty much always going to be sent to the graveyard to search any Shaddolls monster to do your fusion plays with. Which is also important to remember. You can set Beast or Aerial or Dragon off of the Shaddolls Wendy, and they still offer very nice effects. Beast, like a lot of people underestimate it because you just swing into it, but the fact that you get to draw 2 and discard 1, triggering one of your Shaddolls while digging deeper into your deck for your control cards, is just super powerful, honestly. And like it's also important because it can get rid of your own window if you ever need to go for a push, because you can just tribute summon over your own window. That's it for those two. Aerial is super nice because you get essentially your Sinister Shadow Games becomes a very nice disruption with Aerial against decks like Drytrons, Eldritch, stuff like that, because you just target their whole graveyard, get rid of it. Aerial other effect of when it's flipped is also very important to remember, because it helps you with your grind game when your stuff gets banished off Schism and stuff. Dragon, the final one, you can use it as spell or trap removal, but it's also important to remember you can summon it off of Wendy and set it, and then it turns your Sinister Shadow Games into an extra disruption, or your Shaddolls incarnation in your graveyard into another disruption. And of course that applies for Squamata too, since it pops a monster. Finally, the triple Mathematician and Trick Clown. Mathematician is just so versatile. It just gets you any Shaddolls you want. You can send Squamata, Wendy, or Hedgehog. Usually you'll also be sending those. Usually you won't be sending these. But I'm guessing turn 1 you're most likely going to be sending Wendy if you know their plays. And then Wendy can set you a Hedgehog or a Beast from your deck. Also, of course, I'm playing the Magister's Moon Maiden, so that just turns Mathematician into a much more impactful normal summon. And then finally, the one Trick Clown, like I mentioned, it's honestly not super great, but I feel like you have to play it just for Shaddolls Fusion, and being able to summon Construct from using your main deck only. Which brings me on to the spell cards. So obviously Shaddolls Fusion is one of your huge bomb cards, going second. It prompts disruption from your opponent, essentially forces your opponent to absolutely negate it, or they're going to be in such a bad position, because you're just sending Clown and any Shaddolls you want, and you just got full combo from there. Also, Fusion is even more important in this deck because it acts as a pseudo disruption on your opponent's turn. Now, even when you summon a card like Construct on your opponent's turn, it becomes a disruption because of something like Aerial and Dragon, which is just super nice. A lot of people forget that. They just think only Winda or Applone can be used as disruption in your opponent's turn, but now Construct can be a disruption as well. And surprisingly, Construct's effect to like auto destroy whatever it attacks can actually be quite hard for some decks to out, which is important to remember. And finally, Super Poly. Oh yeah, I love this card in this deck because like it essentially can unbrick you too. Because if you just draw a hand of like all these Shaddolls that with like no fusion spells, just this, you can set them and activate Super Poly as a disruption and as a pseudo starter, because you're getting your Shaddolls to the graveyard, triggering their effects while disrupting your opponent, and while putting up like a construct or a window, which is just insane. Window acts as further disruption, or a construct acts as further interruption or extension, which is why I love Super Poly so much. And of course, do I even need to talk about like going second? This is what helps the deck go second, in addition to the Shaddoll Fusion. So if you're able to draw these two going second like together, like that game is just you should just be in such a good position, because you can Super Poly away their negates most of the time, and then Shaddoll Fusion them right after, and then that should be it. For the trap cards, Schism, this I feel like you should prioritize getting to this turn 1 if you were able to trigger off a Skomata or a construct, because so like what I like doing, I don't really like sticking a window on the board when I have the option to just dump a Schism and end on a gravity controller plus a Schism, because Schism most of the time is going to have access to like Skomata and Wendy in the graveyard, meaning you have access to all 3 of your fusions, like whatever, no matter what the situation is. So depending on what deck your opponent's playing, this Schism can get you into any one of those 3 instead of just sticking with the window on the board, because against some decks obviously window isn't that good. So yeah, that's why I would say prioritize Schism going first is my advice, unless your hand is very, very insane in a way where you actually would rather go for like El Shaddoll Fusion so you can push for more damage or for game later on, or maybe even the next turn. The important thing with one Rest Shaddoll Incarnation is that the banish effect pretty much should only be used when you know you're at a point that using it will like swing the game in your favor, or that you're using it to like protect yourself so that you don't die during that turn. Is very important because you only play one. But I feel like you only need one because you can keep adding it back with your Shaddoll Fusions, and then you obviously keep looping the fusions, which is really good, and then looping this, which is just super, super nice. Triple Sinister Shadow Games. This card, it's important to remember, like I said, just don't forget that has the other effect to flip up your Shaddolls monsters. So meaning, even if you have a beast set, you can use it to use beast, draw 2, hopefully draw into something like Aerial or Dragon. If you draw into any of these and discard them, like they act as disruptions as well. So don't remember that, like just remember the other flip effect can be huge. I also think it's important to remember, because if your Shaddolls monster sticks, it essentially becomes a +1 because it stays on the board, and when you use it for a fusion play on your turn, you're able to get its other effect. So it's important to try to flip up your Shaddolls on your opponent's turn as much as possible. And of course, in a way, this acts as a pseudo starter because you just dump Skomata, dump Wendy sets you whatever you want. And of course, remember, not once per turn. Paleozoic Dinomyscus. This card is very, very good spot removal and protection for your window. This is one of like few cards that like essentially act as protection for your window, because like just very, very straight up protection. Because if you have window and your opponent has a bigger monster like that, after they special summoning once, if you Dinomyscus them, your window sticks, their turn pretty much ends, and yeah, you're in just such a good spot after that. So, and also very important, don't forget its effect. When you activate another trap while it's in the graveyard, you get to special summon it back. And then finally, I'm going to talk about Torrential Tribute and Strike Together. These are huge blowouts against combo decks, especially Torrential, especially against combo decks, because like the fact that like it's not once per turn, and the fact that I can completely just wipe them of all their resources and their turn while gaining pluses off your Shaddolls effects. So it's important to remember, if you have a hand like Skomata, Torrential, and like just 3 random other traps that don't really do anything, you can like set Skomata, set Torrential, and then activate Torrential when your opponent does something. It destroys your Skomata, and since it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you get Skomata's effect to send whatever you want and start your plays from there. And when paired with Solemn Strike, like I said in my deck profile, it breaks any board. Honestly, it breaks any combo board, as long as they don't already have like Boral Sword and like something big on board for some reason. Although I don't know why they'd have that on board. But even Solemn Strike alone, I would think against your deck, a lot of people might try to make a Nightmare Phoenix to like pop your back row because they see that you're playing a lot of back row. So I would actually suggest, like, if you're aware of that, you can actually save this after they discard, forcing them to go like -2 because they linked away 2 guys, discarded a card, and they just strike their Phoenix effect, and like, yeah, like they just lost the link 2 monster, plus they lost the chance to destroy your back row, and they lost a card from hand. So Solemn Strike can offer some very, very nice blots, and against, like, people just forget, like, Pendulum Summoning, like, you can strike the whole Pendulum Summon if people are still playing that deck. But even if they aren't playing Pendulum Summons, like, Solemn Strike can just be a very, very solid 1-for-1. Like, your opponent normal summon Stratos, like, strike, okay, cool, that's just a 1-for-1. It can definitely swing the favor swing the game in your favor, and especially, like, if you have something like El Shaddol and strike against, like, a monster board, you can essentially guarantee your El Shaddol resolving. So if your opponent, let's say, I don't know, like, sets up like Dweller Dragoon or something, you can just like set these 2, because like they're gonna Dweller you on your turn. It doesn't even matter, because you just set these 2. When they try Dwellering you again, you can strike it or whatever. Or when you activate El Shaddol, obviously they're not gonna shotgun the Dweller. If you activate El Shaddol Fusion and they Dweller, you just chain strike. Their Dragoon can't do anything. You send your 2 guys to grave, and then you essentially pretty much get pluses off of all your fusions and your Shaddol effects, and their negation can't really do much to it. So Strike is also very good at protecting your other stuff. So yeah, in addition to Torrential, it can also protect stuff like Schism from resolving, and protect like Resh resolving, protect Dino Miscus. Like, Strike honestly is just super, super good. It's also important to remember it can be used in a way like offensively to allow your stuff to resolve like late game. So if you draw a Shaddol Fusion later on, you're able to strike your opponent's hand trap, you're able to strike your opponent's monster negate. Yeah, it's also important to remember this can negate hand traps. But yeah, hopefully that wasn't too ranty, and hopefully I was able to offer you guys some new insights and advice when playing this deck. Some just overall advice. You are playing control deck, I would say prioritize understanding like the meta, like understand how each deck uses its resources, how its deck gains its resources. Like, that way you best know, when to hit them with like your traps. So against something like Drytrons, it's important to remember they float from the graveyard. Something as simple as that. Against Virtual World, to remember end phase, their GG always adds back a follow-up. And their Chuchi is always going to stay up on the board until you get rid of it. So it's important to remember you gotta prioritize cutting off the resources, and then you should just win this win the slow game because of all your Shaddol effects, how well they grind. But yeah, that's it. That's all I gotta say. If you're just getting into Yu-Gi-Oh, this is probably a really, really nice budget deck, because very easy to understand, and it teaches you some very important things on how to disrupt your opponent, because it forces you to understand the metagame and whatever. I guess one more thing I would mention, like, overall my estimate for the cost of this deck is definitely under like 75 Canadian dollars easily, and like, for those of you who are living in the US, it's probably like less than $50 US. So that's a very, very fair price to pay for a very competitive deck that won't get hit on the ban list. If anything, it might only get better or something. But yeah, that was actually it for me. I'm gonna stop talking. I just want to thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked the video, leave a like, comment, subscribe, and be sure to stay tuned for more videos coming your way soon. And I will see you guys soon.